The girl in the locked room is about our protagonist, Jules, who is always moving around the country with her parents. She moves into a house in Virginia, and it sure does give her the creeps. But she meets a girl and becomes really good friends with her. The story begins with our main protagonist. Jules is a young girl who is constantly moving around the country with her parents. Her father works on old houses to make them look newer, and her mother writes crime novels. They move into a house in Virginia. The house is old and worn down and overall disturbs Jules. But that is not the main reason why Jules is so scared. It is because of the house her father is working on. The house they are living in is far away from most people and surrounded by trees, with a stream not too far away. This would not be too scary, but the house her father is working on is directly next to theirs. The house is completely abandoned and no one has lived in it since 1889. The house has mold on it and overgrown grass all around it. The floors creak whenever you walk around the large house and has an overall eerie feeling to it. But Jules is not the only protagonist of this story, for there is another protagonist. The girl lives in the house next to Jules. She lives on the third floor, all alone. She does not remember anything about herself. She can't even remember her own name, who she is, why she's trapped in this room, how long she's been here. She can't even remember who her parents are. Almost every night, she hears people running up the stairs and pounding on the door. She hides in the wardrobe and ignores them, and eventually, they go away. As the days progress more, Jules begins to notice the girl. The house hadn't been touched in years, so this scares Jules. She would look out her window and see the girl walking back and forth in her room. One night, as Jules laid in her bed fast asleep, she woke up to the sound of men yelling and horses running. She hid under the covers and prayed they would go away. She heard them go into the house and then run back into the woods. Jules began experiencing odd things every day. For example, Jules and her parents were on a walk, and Jules noticed a family in outdated clothing walking down the street. She turned to tell her parents, but by the time she turned back, they were gone. Her and her mother lay in a field near their house. Her mother fell asleep, and Jules looked up at the sky. She turned her head and was startled to see a young girl with long blonde hair and a light blue 1800s style dress sitting next to them. Jules shot up and woke her mother. But just like last time, when she turned back, she was gone. She searched through the midden near her house to find things about the family who lived in the house previously, and found a few china dolls and an old key. As she turned away from the dolls, she heard little voices coming from the dolls. She whipped her head around, but just again, nothing spoke. But then she heard a whisper in her ear, telling her, "Keep the key." Jules hesitantly dropped the key in her pocket and walked away. Her parents told her it was just the old house and her overactive imagination, or she was just dreaming. One rainy day, Jules ran out of books to read, and she asked her mother to bring her to the library. As she was at the library, she met a girl around her age with light brown curly hair and glasses. She talked to the girl whose name was Maisie. Maisie recommended a few books that revolved around alternate realities. She told Jules what they were, and Jules was interested yet confused by the topic. Jules tells Maisie where she lived, and Maisie's eyes widen. She told Jules that the house she lived next to could possibly be haunted by a ghost family who was murdered in the 1800s. Jules was scared by the idea and told her that she had seen a few things, and even told Jules that the little girl's name was Lily. After a bit of talking, they decided to have a sleepover and maybe even look at the house next to Jules' home. The night of the sleepover rolled around, and Maisie and Jules played around most of the night. After a bit, Jules' mother finally put the two to bed, and Jules' parents went to bed themselves. Jules and Maisie waited a bit before crawling out of bed and grabbing flashlights and then quietly walking outside. They hesitantly walked toward the house, and Jules gripped onto the key in her pocket. They go inside and look around for clues. Eventually, they do not find much downstairs, so they walk upstairs in hope of finding something. They walk down the hall, and every door is locked, apart from one. At the end of the hall is an old, bloody door. The two attempt to open the door, and Jules takes the key out of her pocket. Just as she does, she hears men yelling, and the sound of horse running. Jules rushes to the door. The men get through the front door and run up each floor as Jules' hands shake uncontrollably. But after Maisie gives it a try, the door finally opens. They run inside and slam the door as the men try to kick it down. They keep quiet, and eventually, they leave. The two look around and search for Lily. After a bit of convincing, she comes out. The girls talk to her, and after a bit of talking, the girls convince Lily to meet them at a nearby willow tree. The girls reminded Lily a lot about her past, and she had many things to think about. Lily's story begins one morning in 1889, back when her house was beautiful and not rotten. Her and her parents, Lauren and Henry, were wealthy and had maids and a chef. She came downstairs expecting breakfast from the chef, but to Lily's confusion, she wasn't there. Lily asked her father, "Where's Aunt Nellie?" Lily always called the chef Aunt Nellie, but her parents never had an issue with it. But her father scolded her for it and told Lily not to call her that anymore. Her father desperately tried to cover it up and ignore it. All of Lily's questions raced through his brain, but eventually just brushed her off completely. They were supposed to have a picnic that day, but Lily was concerned about who was going to make the food. Her and her mother made the food instead, as Lily's father sketched the scene. I want to read all this. After a lot of messy cooking, Lily and her parents went off to a spot for a picnic. They spent the day there and made sweet memories, unaware about the horrors they were about to face. Later on, they went home and Lauren and Henry tucked Lily into bed that night and went to bed themselves. Later that night, Lily was woken up by her mother standing at the edge of her bed with a worried expression. Lily rushed downstairs with her mother. Downstairs was Aunt Nellie and her husband, Mr. Bailey, who had stolen their horses and money, then forced Nellie to come with them. Henry and Mr. Bailey yelled at each other as Mr. Bailey demanded money from him. Lauren told Lily to go upstairs on the third floor and hide in Henry's art room. Lily rushed upstairs and hid in the art room as everyone fought downstairs. She heard gunshots and screaming. Despite that, she did not disobey her mother and stayed hidden. Mr. Bailey bangs on the door and asks Lily to come out, but she refuses, and she stays quiet. She waits for her parents, but they never came. She waited hours, days, weeks, months, and years, but no one came for her. Lily stared at the key that Jules had left on the ground, and the open door in front of her, and finally stepped out of the room, and outside, to the willow tree. She met Jules and Maisie there, and Maisie told Lily about alternate realities, which struck the idea for Lily to stand up to the men that pounded on the door each night. Maisie and Jules agreed, and they all decided to do it that night. The night rolled around, and Lily stood at the door and waited for the sound of horses and men yelling. She rushed downstairs, and everything was just like the night her parents were killed. She stood at the stairs and watched Mr. Bailey and Henry argue. Enraged, Lily yelled at Mr. Bailey, and Mr. Bailey grabbed her, but she bit down on him, making him drop his gun. She heard two voices tell her to grab the gun, but she did not recognize these voices, but still listened to them. And as she picked up the gun, her father grabbed the arm of one of Mr. Bailey's men and pointed his gun toward Mr. Bailey and shot him dead. Lily ran into her mother's arm, and she knew that she was finally safe. Jules and Maisie watched in amazement as Lily helped kill Mr. Bailey, and they smiled, knowing that Lily would finally be where she belonged. The next day, her father worked on the third floor. To their relief, Lily was not there. He found a few paintings, and Jules asked to keep one of Lily. Everything was going to be great, and it got even better when she learned that she would be staying in Virginia, and Jules would be going to school with Maisie. Jules was overjoyed, because for once in her life, she wouldn't be alone.